sometimes it's very difficult to bring to words all of the different branches, all the different octopus arms of what I'm focused on. I don't live a traditional life in which I have a single profession. I find myself somewhat an artist, somewhat a philosopher, somewhat a facilitator, somewhat a writer, somewhat a world explorer, a body through which deep reflections occur on the moving pieces of our time. And so with that in mind, I'm still going to attempt today to give something resembling a project update and share about what are the plates I'm spinning, what are the canvases I'm painting, what am I dialing in on during these months. The first thing is an essay on the philosopher and theologian Teilihard De Jardin, who is absolutely fascinating, French Jesuit priest who was a stretcher bearer in the First World War and went on as a paleontologist, as a scientist in China to be involved in the discovery of the Peking Man, and ultimately write some incredibly visionary works, one of which is called The Future of Man, which I've been revisiting for a second time, and I'm now going to be sharing on the Culture Pilgrim Substack about these ideas, because I really feel his vision has a kind of poetic, spiritual truth which cuts through, and when I can actually really feel the impact of his writing, my reality is deeply enriched. And so Teilihard really combines spirituality and evolution in a way that I'd never encountered before. He articulates how we as human beings are at the horizon, at the frontier of a process 300 million years or more in the making of matter coming together into greater forms of complexification, increasing over time, and with that eventually giving rise to consciousness. So this is kind of like body, mind, spirit development that he articulates. And Teilihard explores a lot about the nature of our time and this sense of things closing in closer together, this kind of compression, this kind of completion of a global circuit of communication in which we all become deeply, deeply interconnected. It's something that causes a lot of trouble for us in society, because for a long time we've been governed and lived by values which we took to be given values, givens. And as O.G. Rose talks about in his work, Belonging Again, around the conflict of society, we start to really rub up against this when we discover there are a lot of people who don't share our values, who are alongside us, and therefore our values are no longer given. They are in some sense contested. And then there's kind of a process of contestation between us, because we have some sort of tendency to want our values to be given. There's also a desire to deconstruct the values on which our society has been built. Our culture is, by some movements, described as fundamentally wrong, that we're fallen, that basically Western civilization is built on sin, the sins of colonialism, the sins of empire, the sins of aspects of Christianity. And so there's a kind of tearing up of the foundation, and this also like reduces the sense of givens on which a lot of people are standing upon. And what O.G. Rose says is actually that when we start to lose all of our givens, and we enter into this like really confusing postmodern space in which it's very difficult to say anything is true, then there's a really strong totalitarian urge. And this is something that Teilihard De Jardin touches on in his visionary works, which he wrote during the middle of the Second World War. And if you think about just how fucked the global situation was in 1942, 1943, it's really incredible that he was able to have this profound vision of the ages come through. And so Teilihard suggests that actually we are going to rub up against this conflict between one another as we're brought closer and closer together. And in that context, we will have two roads open for us. One of them is a kind of collectivization based upon homogenization and control, and getting people to be similar and be like and be together on the basis of some sort of collective enforcement. And this points to communism, which of course was an experiment for most of the last century, and fascism also. And there's definitely a potential for new forms of totalitarianism and control in our age, with technologies greater than any of the dictators of the past could possibly have hoped or thought of in their wildest dreams. And so alongside that possibility, Teilihard proposes that there is another kind of coming together that may be possible, that there's a kind of drawing together on the basis of a common spirit, a common love, a common soul in the earth that can take place in this phase shift that we are in. And that this actually is this is the basis upon which the individual and the collective can be reconciled in a way that gives rise to the greatest complexification and development of consciousness. And so for Teilihard, actually, it's when the individual is most fully realized in their uniqueness that they can then participate most fully with all of the other individuals, and that they can kind of be that atom that becomes part of a molecule, and that molecule that becomes part of a larger structure, which is able to move with a greater intelligence, much like our bodies. And so Teilihard paints a beautiful vision of this, and he also draws down a deeply spiritual and radical notion, which I first encountered through the psychedelic cult figure Terence McKenna, who had actually read Teilihard. And both of them articulated an idea called the omega point. And basically the notion is that there is a kind of horizon, there is a kind of omega at the horizon of time, at the horizon, at the end of the world, let's say, that has a kind of attractive force. It's not simply a void, it's something that's actually drawing us together into that common spirit of love. And so for Teilihard, there's a kind of Christological, kind of Christ-conscious energy in the horizon of the future, which evolution is actually building matter up towards this place in which matter and spirit reach some inconceivable communion. So it's breathtakingly beautiful, it's very dense, he's incredibly intelligent, and I'm doing my best to draw out the richness of that work, The Future of Man. He has many other great books, and we'll be delivering that for the Culture Pilgrim Substack. Second big project, which has emerged this year, is the Resonant Man. The Resonant Man is something that's been growing between myself and Matthew Green through the course of our relationship over the last 2 years, many dialogues. We actually were brought together over a shared interest in ancestral inheritance, the impact of war on our ancestors and how that had shaped our lives. And we had both found ourselves tapping into this frontier of collective trauma healing and the new understandings of how our lives are shaped by that, and the ways in which that work can unlock different qualities of consciousness, sensitivity, and capacity to participate in what's called group fields. Alongside that, I've participated in a number of men's initiatives over the years. I organized an initiative called Men Emerging during the COVID years. I also had a follow-up initiative called Dialogos and Fellowship, and was really aiming in those efforts to bring together the core qualities of a men's group: accountability, collective care and attention, the capacity to share what's going on in your life with others who share authentically what's going on in their life, but not simply to be a men's group, to actually have a higher goal, to be seeking to cultivate certain qualities. And in the context of Dialogos and Fellowship, a lot of that was about that capacity to enter into that really alive space of flow and dialogue, in which we are actually going beyond our own individual mentalities and capacity to articulate our reality. And through this back and forth process with one another or with a group, we're actually able to tap into a kind of collective awareness, a collective wisdom. And what that feels like is getting to a place where I don't need to know what's going to happen next. I'm just in a deeply present flow and unfoldment with the movement of the conversation. And in so doing, we arrive at places that we couldn't have intended to arrive. And so Dialogos is an invaluable tool, and it's something that's definitely going to be at the heart of Resonant Man. We've been doing a lot of work to actually build out a vision and a landscape, a kind of map of the Resonant Man, whether it be aspects of leadership and responsibility, more traditional masculine virtues, or whether it be indeed in relationship to the feminine and our capacity to be in touch with intuition, and more subtle forms of guidance that allow us to make decisions that open doors and bring us closer to our path. And yeah, I'm really excited to bring about the Resonant Man. Matthew and I have started to think of the Resonant Man not just as a concept or a vision, but as a kind of spirit that we are tapping into as we envision the program. And when we do tap into it, it is incredibly enlivening and enriching, and we can barely stop because we are tapping into a current between the two of us, which itself seems to do the work of unlocking more potential between us and downloading ideas from the future. And so we're immensely excited to share that, and we'll be sharing more on that soon, but that's just a little initial announcement. Along with that, as you guys know, I've been at it with the rap music. Culture Pilgrim has been crafting. It's been enormously rewarding to see the flow develop, to see myself kind of expand into different dimensions. I'm still really aware that I'm, just getting started with the rhyming, but there's been an enormous amount of progress since the first track, which started in about February, April last year. So there's a lot of really bomb stuff going to be dropped soon. There's a track called CRYSIS, which I've put a lot of artistic visioning into, and I think really is a piece that captures the state of the world and the state of America, and the sense of being in the middle of this moment of crisis whilst also being subject to our own addictions and attentional losses, and in the midst of that feeling things fall apart and having this kind of drumbeat rising underneath all of that, and that feeling of a kind of shamanic awakening occurring within us and within culture that holds the hope and potential to respond and move very differently through the crisis or crises that we face. So I'm still waiting to get the master on that, but I'm very excited to launch, and all of the materials and video is ready. So that's going to be dope. Last of all, perhaps beyond the scope of this, I've been wrestling a great deal with place out here in Mexico, really sensing into where should I be, and on what basis can I decide, if this is the place for me to root deeper and keep following God deeper into Oaxaca, or whether I ought to be somewhere else. So I've been calling on a lot of counsel from wise friends, some of whom you will have seen in Sense-Based podcast, and that's been enormously helpful in resourcing me. And I'm hoping in the coming months or year to actually create a wisdom council resource in which, those of you who are looking for really finely tuned expert counsel can tap into that, as a kind of database, as a place where you can find the wisdom that you need to serve you in that moment. And in respect to that, I will also be launching my own offering very soon, a kind of 3-tiered adventure process for dialogue, for dialogos. And I'll be saying a lot more about that in an upcoming Substack, but those of you who are looking to delve deeper in an exploration, I'll be offering an adventure on following the logos and basically seeing how far the rabbit hole goes together, really philosophically following the threads as far as they lead, and learning to kind of follow our intuition where the dialogue wants to unfold, ultimately to reveal some greater truth or understanding for us. Alongside that, there's going to be medicine space, and that's going to be much more of a plant medicine informed, offering much more of a meditation and prayer infused space, potentially more for integration, rehabilitation, or holding space for challenging processes that we might be undergoing. And then finally, Lovers of Wisdom is going to be a really purely philosophical practice of exploring different virtues and different wisdoms, and seeing how we can exalt them and realize the wisdoms in the context of our own life experiences. So we'll be drawing up what's actually happening in our lives, and then trying to sense into where is the wisdom in these situations, and then trying to actually bring that out, so that we can kind of tap into that philosophical guidance between the two of us, and come away with a deeper clarity of navigation. And last of all, I've been reflecting a lot on the relationship between my artistic creations, my philosophical participation in various online communities and networks, and to what extent that integrates those parts which broadly fall under the political or the more masculine, responsive aspect, which seeks to actually articulate what it is I'm seeing in a clear way, and to draw distinctions about what I sense to be occurring in the world. And I know that often in the more creative, certainly in the context of Culture Pilgrim, that's not something I've done a great deal. And I'm going to be looking over the next few weeks and possibly months at how I can start to integrate that more. And I know there's going to be there's some trepidation for me in doing that, because I know that some of the things that I perceive and articulate are going to be in contrary to what you guys are seeing and understanding to be going on. But I think it's really important that I can begin to do that for myself to put those things forward clearly, and then you guys can chew on it, and then we can potentially wrestle on it and come to a deeper clarity. But I don't think it can happen when we're kind of drawing back from the conversation and basically being cowed out of participating and sharing what we perceive because of that culture war charge, because of that fear of turning swathes of people against you, because of that self-censorship that can occur. So I'm going to be looking at how to bring through those hot and difficult areas in a careful way, and hopefully in a way that can be integrated with the larger vision that I spoke to at the beginning of this video, and that informs the rest of the work. So, successful project update. Thanks so much for listening. Much love, and yeah, stay tuned.